Now like to introduce you to the Chair of the Australia Day Council of South Australia, Mr Houssam Abiad. Please make him welcome.
Well, this is absolutely marvellous, isn't it? I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and that we acknowledge the people, Adelaide Plains, acknowledge them and recognise and respect them. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land, and we acknowledge they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. I would also like to acknowledge our very special guests, His Excellency the Honourable Hugh Van Lay, the Governor of South Australia, and Mrs Van Lay, thank you. The Honourable Russell Wortley, MLC, President of the Legislative Council, representing the Premier of South Australia, Jay Weatherill, and his wife, Dana Wortley, MP, Member for Torrens. Vicky Chapman, MP, Deputy Opposition Leader, representing the Leader of the Opposition, Stephen Marshall. The Honourable Jing Lee, Member for the Legislative Council, Rachel Sanderson, MP, Member for Adelaide, Mr Craig Brooke, Regional General Manager for the Commonwealth Bank, SANT, and also our South Australians that are now finalists for the Australian of the Year Award for 2017, our pride and joy, Kate Swaffer, Reginald George Heading, Paul Vasilev and Patricia Buckskin. Another round of applause for them, please. Mayors and councillors from a number of councils across South Australia, Australia Day ambassadors, corporate club members, board members of the Australia Day Council of South Australia, and our fantastic team that have put this event together and many other events. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Australia Day Council of South Australia, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all here today to the most anticipated lunch event of the start of every new year, the Australia Day Lunch for 2017. And as we heard before, events like this could never be possible without the support of our sponsors. I'd like to acknowledge again the Commonwealth Bank, Channel 9, Cooper's Brewery, Serafino Wines, Brand South Australia, Novatech, Argon Design and Caton's Bakery. Cries she with silent lips, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore, send these. The homeless tempest tossed to me, I lift my lamp beside the golden door. These are the words that grace the Statue of Liberty. A very timely quote, given that the United States of America today is inaugurating its new president. I would say, if you have to, learn from your own mistakes, but make none if you can learn from someone else's. But in Australia, we are different. We are fairer, and it's because we can trace our very history to the beginning, to the very beginning. The many successes we celebrate as a nation, but also in parts of our history, darkness and horrors that we wish we can only undo. We have it right in Australia, right, but not perfect. History didn't start with us. In my mind, the fair, nurturing and abundant spirit of Australia didn't start at a specific hour, day, month or year. It was here from the very beginning. We all share a story, and that's the Australian story. Just looking back at your own history, which story didn't start with when I came here, or when my parents arrived here, or when my grandparents arrived here, or even my great-grandparents arrived here? We have all arrived here. Somewhere in time, somehow, someone in our own family made that decision, made that call, for one reason or another, to leave our country and home because it was simply no longer a viable option. Imagine how hard it would have to get for someone to leave everything they know behind, their family, their loved ones, their belongings, the food, and I think we brought the food with us, and come to a brand new place with a brand new start. Imagine if we had to, as Australians today, to pack up and migrate somewhere else. Where would we go and who will take us? I'll give you an example. This is perfect in my household. If you're cooking 4 chickens and you're expecting 2 or 3 people over for lunch or dinner, and another 2 people decide to rock up, it's okay. All we have to do is make a little bit more rice. Or as my mum would say, go to the 3rd freezer in the garage and pull out another bit of chicken. Boundless plains to share. We are, and we're all hungry when we first arrived here. and now it's very easy to ignore someone else's hunger on a full stomach. But despite many of our stories that we share, sometimes the only thing we really have in common is our diversity. Diversity is our opportunity and strength. Diversity should always win over division. Hope should always win over fear. And fairness should always win over indulgence. Can you imagine the Amazons just had monkeys living in it? Ecosystems require diversity for it to be able to sustain life. Australia is ever-changing. Most people refer to Australia as the melting pot of cultures. I refer to Australia as a salad. Because unlike a melting pot of culture, I think the different fruits and vegetables that represent Australia really represent it well. It says that we are better mixed than blended. The flavours we add to this country are authentic, with no two mouthfuls ever the same. But also there's a huge difference between equality and equity. Australia shouldn't strive to give its people the same chances. In Australia, we should personalise fairness at every single opportunity we can. We are powerful only because we are fair. We are strong as a city, a state, and a nation because we are different. Especially in Adelaide, the city of churches. I would argue that Adelaide didn't get its nickname on the back of just being religious. We are also free. Adelaide, the first city in Australia to be of free settlers. People chose to come to Australia from all walks of life, escaping religious, political and economic persecution. Adelaide did underwrite Australia's success by electing the first democratic government, to be the first in the world to elect a woman to Parliament, to elect the first and appoint the first in Australia, an Aboriginal man as our governor, and also to appoint an asylum-seeking refugee as our current governor today. And Your Excellency, it gives us great pleasure to have you here with Mrs. Landley with us for this lunch. We were first to decriminalise homosexuality, and we were also the first to raise the Aboriginal flag in Victoria Square in support of our land rights and Aboriginal land rights in 1971. Imagine how progressive that is. A city of freedom and fairness, a city where the first mosque of Australia was built here in Adelaide in the 1800s. Adelaide was, is and remains a leader in social justice. So I've spent the last 20 years of my life living in Adelaide, having to spell my name to practically everyone I meet. Every phone call, every conversation. Hey mate, how are you? What's your name? Houssam. Is that Houssam with an N? No, it's Houssam with an M. Can you spell that for me? Yes, Houssam. Houssam, M for Mary. You know Mary? Jesus. The first question after that, of course, is, mate, where are you from? Adelaide. Nah, really, where are you from? So my name is Houssam with an M, and I'm an Australian Muslim. I was born to migrant parents here in 1976, and at the age of 3, my parents decided to pack up and migrate back to Lebanon permanently. I wish at the age of 3 I could just simply be yanking at my parents' arms as they board the plane and say to them, hey, psst, do you know we're going back to a war zone? Simply, where everyone was fleeing the Middle East, my parents, like salmon to fresh water, decided to go completely against the current. On the life of me, living the 15 years of a civil war was not easy. I often wished we had the social media of today to share many of our stories. We lost many of our loved ones in the war. And as a child, I remember my mother kissing me every day before going to school, hugging me like it was the last day she was ever going to see me. They live 5 minutes away from us now. She still does the same every time Ava and I visit. Love you, Mum. They're here today. Seeing my father dragged out of a car at gunpoint, hiding under staircases in buildings with my little brother on the way to school as shooting erupted, and missing death at a checkpoint by simply one car. Just one car would have kept me away from you today. We accepted and normalised violence. We had it, we had to. It was our only coping mechanism. I remember so many incidents and I block so many more. But today I choose to use them as a reminder to how lucky and blessed we are. I remember the 3 things my parents did every night was to go to sleep with a prayer, with a passport, the Australian passport, under their pillow, and the third one, that little bit of money we had, just in case we had to make a quick escape. Wars do not start when people disagree. Wars start when people lose compassion. They start when being right is not good enough anymore, and we want to go out of our way to prove that someone else is wrong. I never understood why my parents went back to a war-torn country to live on the front line of a civil war, where so-called Muslims killed Christians, and so-called Christians killed Muslims, where humanity took its revenge on humanity. I couldn't understand until I realised how impossible it would be for me to leave, to simply just pick up and leave all the people that we love behind. And the only reason and the only thing that differentiates me from them was that I was holding a piece of paper, the Australian passport, the opportunity. I would argue that at one stage in your history, you've also had to leave some family members behind. Well, unless you're Greek and you brought the whole village with you. So many of them in Adelaide. Couldn't believe it. Funny story, you know what the difference is between the first Lebanese and the Greeks that arrived here in South Australia? They both arrived around the same time, give and take 50 years, but the Greeks bought everything, absolutely everything. And the Lebanese ended up renting all the shops from the Greeks and starting up Italian businesses. Suddenly Muhammad was called Tony. Go figure. My family lost everything in the war, and it was rather impossible for us to live in Lebanon after everything that's happened. So in 1995, almost 16 years on after my parents left Adelaide, they've decided to come back. I couldn't comprehend why many of my family members and friends, as I was departing Lebanon, were looking at me and saying to me, "You are so lucky to be able to leave." I could never comprehend that at the point of time. I never understood why they were saying that to me. So we arrived here, the whole family back in Adelaide. I was 19, new country, new friends, new school, and a new language. Learning Aussie was fun, you reckon? I never thought English could be so entertaining, or at least for the people that were listening to me speak. I learnt most of my Aussie at a snack bar, and for the better part of 3 years, I promise you this, you're not going to believe it, I really thought elbow grease was a detergent. And I'll apply a bit of elbow grease. And I thought that fair dinkum was a product sold at Coles or Woolies. And I even thought Vegemite was Nutella. That experience was definitely scary, life-changing stuff. But also learned that when it gets tough, swearing is okay, you know. And words like mates rates were pretty handy to have. But the two words that echoed with me the most were fair, go. In coming to Australia, everything seemed like low-hanging fruit. My life experiences in Lebanon amplified my senses for opportunity, as the war taught me two very valuable lessons. The first one is to never take anything for granted, and two, that I deserved the right for self-determination. I deserve to have a say on how I live my life. I have never had the opportunity to marry my beautiful wife, Ava, to start my own businesses, be elected, and to have served as a Deputy Lord Mayor, and most certainly to chair this amazing organisation and be your host today. Living in Adelaide meant everything. Suddenly a new lease on life. It is rather difficult to appreciate what Australia has to offer to a full extent without the opportunity of experiencing how tough life can be somewhere else. This is why Australia Day for us is usually a family day. The look you give your parents in thanks for the decision they have made to have you come here or be born here. It is the unspoken that resounds loudest in my family, the subtle hints we give one another on what life was like before. But it should also be a day of remembrance, a day to pay tribute to the many sacrifices made along the way. Australia Day is about celebrating what we have become as a nation, not how we started as one. On the 26th of January, and on the flip coin of our celebrations, other Australians mourn their countless losses at a survival day. I would like to pay tribute to our Indigenous communities that despite many of history's horrors, they emerge positive, inclusive, and hospitable to us. We have much to learn from our first people. our Indigenous communities. And on Australia Day, let us never forget the past, but also let us never repeat it. We should live with a reminder that we will never be free, not even in Australia, if we don't advocate for justice everywhere. So where would I be today if I wasn't here? Where would you be? I would be living in a village north of Lebanon with a PhD and no job prospects. I would probably be married to a Lebanese, most possibly Muslims, because I wasn't open to other ethnicities and religions. I would have at least 2 or 3 kids that I would struggle to feed or even send to school. I would most probably be sitting at a cafe somewhere, smoking shisha, having coffee, playing backgammon or cards, watching the news. That sounds pretty cool though. But I would also have no understanding of the West. And I simply would never have been afforded the opportunity to visit it, because a Lebanese passport gets you nowhere. All of this living in a country that is 1/10 the size of South Australia with 4 times the population. Mind you, over 1 million of these people are refugees. That could have easily been me or even you without the Australian passport. The world is not in a good place at the moment, my friends. But was it ever? Throughout history and now, world wars, invasions, colonisations, massacres, war crimes, terrorism, mass exodus of people and refugees, the rise of Pauline, Trump and Brexit. It seems we never learn from history, and that is why it keeps repeating itself, as if to just remind us. The world is responding to extremism with extremism. It almost feels that we have lost completely our middle ground. We will be naive to think that history stops with us. We will not have the answers to all of our problems today, but the future definitely will. We as Australians have an opportunity now to seize the moment, especially with everything that is happening around the world. We can affect change, we can show leadership, and we can franchise our fairness. We can go out there and demonstrate our successful formula for coexistence, because peace, tolerance and equity are more than words, they are also a perspective. And the only way we can effect change is by changing our own personal perspective, by changing the way we treat one another, because change is needed. But change needs courage. And courage, my friends, well, courage changes absolutely everything. Thank you very much for listening to me today.